Today's quote comes from a fellow who writes, "I stepped on my scale this morning and it said, 'Please use social distancing, one person at a time.'" Today we have the passage from Mark chapter 8, verses 14 to 21, and this occurs right after the confrontation with the Pharisees. And so they get into the boat and are crossing the Sea of Galilee, and the disciples realize they forgot to bring bread with them. They only had one loaf of bread. And of course, this was actually right after the Lord had multiplied the loaves and fish, and they had 7 baskets left over. Most likely they gave those to the poor, and they only brought 1 loaf of bread with them. They were supposed to bring certainly enough probably for all the apostles, but they left in a hurry. And as they're by boat, Jesus gives them a teaching. Now the Lord here is speaking about, he says, guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the yeast of Herod. Sometimes it's called the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Leaven is, as you know, yeast that raises the whole dough. And oftentimes in Scripture, leaven or yeast is considered something bad. And so it's referring here to the evil plots, to the evil intentions of the Pharisees and Herod, because they were trying to trap him. Ultimately, they were trying to arrest him and trying to kill him. So the Lord is giving them a teaching to be careful about the heresies, the evil teachings, the wickedness, the evil plots of those who are trying to destroy him. But the apostles are really on a very human plane, a very natural plane. And it says they, trying to figure out what the Lord was talking about, figured out, he was saying that they forgot to bring bread. So notice they were a very human way. I've always felt that a great movie about the apostles should be called Clueless, right? Because that's what they were for the 3 years they were with the Lord. They were clueless so much of the time. And so then Jesus asked them many questions. Do you not understand or comprehend? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes and not see, ears and not hear? And then the Lord reminds them that with him there was always abundance. He says, don't you remember when I only had 5 loaves of bread and there were 5,000 people? How many baskets were left over? And they answered 12. See, with the Lord there is always abundance. The Lord always goes above and beyond anything we expect. Then he says, when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many leftovers do we have? And they said 7 baskets full. Again, with Christ there was always abundance. So they should not be worrying about bread because they had the bread of life with them in the boat. Jesus has power over things like bread and fish. And so they had been with the Lord. They had already seen countless miracles, and yet they were still unbelieving. And notice that they had been at the wedding feast of Cana when the Lord changed water into wine, not just a small amount, but 120 gallons to 180 gallons. That's how much water was in those ceremonial washing jars, and he turned it all into wine. Look at the abundance that was left over in both times when he multiplied the loaves and fish. It's interesting that one of those miracles occurred in Gentile territory, another one in Jewish territory, which shows that Jesus would one day feed the whole world with himself as the bread of life. You can never outdo God in generosity. Scripture says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. God always gives us abundance, much more than we expect. God didn't just send a great teacher or a prophet or a Messiah. He sent his own Son. God gives in abundance. And Jesus would, in his teachings, would also say, go the extra mile. When Peter said, how many times should I forgive my brother when he sins? 7 times? Jesus says, no, 70 times 7 times. Jesus always gives in abundance, as we saw at Cana, as we saw in the multiplication of the loaves, and then even on the cross. 1 drop of Jesus' blood would have redeemed the whole world. But Jesus allowed probably every drop of his blood to drain from his body. Jesus always gives in abundance. Think of the scourging, the crowning with thorns, the carrying of the cross, the crucifixion, where Jesus gave the totality of his blood. Jesus always gives in abundance. And so what we should take from this is that with Christ, we really are never lacking in anything. Let's say you feel that your patience is so small. Ask Jesus to increase it. Ask Jesus to make your patience abundant. Or maybe your love is small, or maybe your forgiveness is small. Ask Jesus, who is the source of all these good things, the source of abundance, to increase your faith, your hope, your love. In this day and age, we especially need the virtue of hope. Many people are falling into discouragement or despair. But Jesus can take our faith and increase it. He can take our hope and increase it. He can take our love and increase it, because Christ is truly the Son of God, and he has power. And whenever the Lord is there, he can always bring that abundance.